20 minutes of the best top expert tips and hacks to make your life better. LifeHakx. Technology, business, multimedia, wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. This is Mary Collins from LifeHakx Media, and I have the pleasure to have one of my favorite people, Scott Steinberg, back on LifeHakx with us today. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself? Ready for spring over here?
Yes, absolutely. And really excited about the future because we've had such a delay in the last couple of years. So really wanting to move forward. And I know you're the person to tell everyone how to do that. So I'll give our audience a little bit more information about you before we get started on your new exciting projects. So for our listeners who didn't get to hear last time, Scott Steinberg is the World Leading Business Strategist. He's an award-winning consultant, trends expert, and professional speaker, and one of the world's 150 most influential keynote speakers and futurists. Among today's most quoted industry experts and seen over 1 billion people worldwide, Scott has 12 plus years experience in accurately predicting business and consumer trends, which made him a fixture in mainstream media. Named in Consulting Magazine's top 25 consultants list for excellence in leadership and hailed as one of industry's most influential and impactful voices. He's been a featured guest and a contributor to programs like ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, ESPN, MTV, and a columnist for Change and Innovation for Fast Company, Rolling Stone, Huffington Post, and an insider for over 600 plus media outlets, as well as a strategic advisor to CEOs, four-star generals, and firms like IBM, PwC, and the U.S. Department of Defense. Scott is the CEO of BizDev. It is an international association for business development and strategic partnerships and management consulting, and a market research firm. He is also the creator, and this is the exciting new stuff, of the Pop Future Training Method, offers breakouts, workshops, and training classes in the form of webinars, webcasts, and live events. So, besides me being a #1 fan, I believe Fortune 500 calls you the defining figure in business and technology, and a top trendsetter to follow. So, with that, we're ready for commercial break. Just kidding.
I was going to say, there's your whole segment.
So, I mean, you are so busy and you managed to maintain your schedule even throughout the pandemic.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about how you got through these really difficult times.
Well, I think as you've noticed from the number of projects we have going on, creating is a big piece of it and staying busy. And so one of the things early on that I realized as an independent is that you don't want to rely on somebody else to give you the motivation or the financial incentive to go and create something. You really got to have that inner wellspring, and that really pushes you to make, build, and do. And as you might imagine, there wasn't much else going on for several months there. And then for the months after that, it wasn't particularly great news coming out on all fronts. So I just took a lot of the time of the pandemic to build, plan, to create. As you notice, I tend to talk and move at a brisk pace. And so just use the time to really invest in myself in the future. That's what we always say is, look, if you got some downtime, think about projects that you can do or businesses that you can be starting, because these really are investments in yourself. And you, of course, are the best investment of all over time, in the same way that you make little deposits in the bank, and those can add up and pay dividends thanks to the magic of compound interest. Well, guess what? All these things that you're doing and all these new projects that you're trying, they have the potential to pay off in a big way over time as well.
Well, I mean, and that does sound amazing, and it's very sensible what you're saying. But when this started to really happen, and there was this lockdown after lockdown, how did you pick yourself up? Give us the top hacks of how you got up in the morning and faced reality.
Sure. Well, I tend to think of life like a computer programmer of sorts. So everything is a problem to be solved. It's just a question of what approach are you taking. And if one approach does not work, it does not mean that you are a failure. It just means the approach has failed. And so you really just got to attack things from different angles. One of the big life hacks is to remember that most challenges you will face, if not all in life, are basically puzzles to be solved, which means there is a solution if you can just come at things from the right angle and apply the right combination of strategies and factors. And by the way, one of the other life hacks that I keep in mind as well is that you're never really going to fail, because as you're trying something, you're always learning, growing, gaining new resources, getting expertise in new technologies or trends. And by the way, you can apply that to other ventures. So it's really about creating these strategies and solutions that, even if they don't work out directly, that you can apply in other ways as well.
Wow.
Why work harder when you can work smarter and live better? LifeHakx.
So that's wonderful advice, Scott. And so is this how you decided that during your lockdown period, do you continue to write books? So, I mean, added to the last time it was like 19, what are the new additions to your book collection? And everyone who's listening, but literally Scott has written about anything and everything as an expert, which is amazing. You have to tell people how are you able to do that? What are the techniques and tips to being a great speaker and finding out how to put things together?
Sure. Well, there's quite a few things in that question. Let me see if I can unpack it. So for the first piece, as far as new books, we did a number of titles like Think Like a Futurist, which released right towards the beginning of the pandemic. As you can imagine, super popular. Been talking all around the world about that and helping people learn to see a little bit further into the future. Also did a book on digital transformation. We just had one come out called Customer Experience, the Ultimate Guide, because it's all about thinking about how we use technology and new tools like AI and automation to really make every exchange we have on the web or with a business much more human. As for how we actually get them done, I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is you got to be creative and you got to be curious. And it's really important to say, hey, if there's a subject that interests me, I'm going to do a deep dive, gather as much information as possible, but it doesn't mean that you have to stick with one subject. I actually think that, you've heard this idea of a niche can make you rich or be a specialist in one thing. Well, what happens if you're a fax salesman, right? And you find out that like 6 years later, suddenly that's completely irrelevant. So really what I try and do is I have subject matter expertise in a few areas that you try and focus on and really drill down on, but also to have a good sense of being a generalist in other areas. And by the way, a lot of things that you'll learn in one area, for example, basic technology or social media, can then be applied to other areas like cybersecurity and IT, networking and the like, or cloud computing. And you realize that like it gets much easier over time the more skills that you add to your professional toolbox. So what I would say to people is, look, you don't have to be stuck in one subject, but maybe if you have an interest in gadgets or something, think about also how some of those learnings apply in other areas.
Right. And this is it. And what you do as well is that you plan it out. And you were telling me last time that, I'm just so envious of this. I'm on my treadmill and I just dictate, to an app and it's done. And there's a book done just like that. I'm like, first of all, you're on your treadmill. That's not fair. I don't have that kind of discipline. Secondly, so what are the apps that you recommend for things like when you're trying to put your thoughts together and, writing a book?
Oh, sure. Well, there's a ton of them. There's like Drag and Dictate, but there's also a great one that I recommend that you try called Otter. And Otter, for example, is artificial intelligence powered. And so what happens is if you're getting the free plan, it gives you up to 600 minutes a month free that you can audio record. And as you speak, it will take your voice and put it down in text on the screen. And by the way, I can do this for multiple speakers. So like if I had Otter on in the background, it would transcribe our entire conversation. And you can do up to 30-minute bursts with that free plan again. And that's a great one to try just to start with.
That's a great one just to do a script with.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's a vital tool.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, of course, still people need to have, I think, some sort of, like most people at least, have to have some sort of training to organize themselves because everyone has a book in them, right? And everybody says they do.
Sure.
But really, it's quite frustrating. My problem is I deep dive too much and then I get all stuck on research and then the research lies around in piles and then I have like 7 projects going because then that one gets boring. So I think working with you is, now that you finally, have training classes, I think this is the key because I do think you make things sound easy and, that helps, that helps because it encourages people to get on track and do things correctly. So first of all, BizDev, tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So we're the International Association for Business Development and Strategic Planning. And basically we exist to help business development professionals who are the folks out there in the field sourcing deals and partnerships in every industry from music to movies and video games, improve their professional development efforts and to network, meet new people, and really stay up to date on best practices. So we're providing webinars, professional get-togethers in real life. We're also providing all sorts of online resources. That's at bizdevassociation.com. Free membership, by the way, for the moment. And anybody can join, especially if you are a professional in the business development field. And it'll really give you some tools and resources that you can use to stay up to date on what's happening in different industries and to be more competitive. And by the way, like you were saying about making things easier, that's one of our big mandates there, because people have to get up to date on new technologies, new trends faster than ever, even as our attention spans are shrinking. So to go with your case of the books, you'll like this little hack here, may help to start to think of a book in different sizes. If you're doing a full size like you would release at retail, see at the bookstore, that could be 50,000 to 80,000 words. If you're going to do an ebook, maybe it's 20,000 words. And then, by the way, how much is a page? Well, a page is about 600 words, double spaced. So could you write 600 words in a day? Probably so. Could you get in the habit of doing that every morning? I'm going to bet you could. It's a lot easier when you start to think of projects in that way versus like, oh my gosh, how am I going to summon this beautiful manuscript from scratch? You just start getting things down on paper, shoot for the 600 words a day. You can polish it later. But if you just do that for a month, just think about how much material you would have there, even in the raw.
That is wonderful life hacks. And that's what I always try to tell people. Life hacks for me, it doesn't mean hacking into the system, although we've had a few hackers on our show. It is about making things a little bit easier, showing people how to process information or get onto that career change or whatever it is. Just show them the path. That's what I want to do on Life Hacks. And I think you are the most awesome guest for that. So from there, tell us then about Pop Future.
Yes. So this is a new training and education and communications methodology that we've put together, which basically makes complex concepts, could be new technologies like metaverse or NFTs or new business trends, a lot easier to approach and understand. And it makes them more fast and fun to talk about as well. So it's like if I say to you, what is an NFT? You may have some awareness, right? Because you're involved in the business, but a lot of people, their eyes may glaze over. But if I explain, hey, it's a digital collectible, right? It's the virtual equivalent of a baseball card, just happens to be a video or a photo that somebody has sold you and you have ownership rights to, the ding becomes a lot more familiar, right? So what's happened with this is essentially I've said, hey, I'm a keynote speaker. I'm often on stage and I've given about 30 minutes to get somebody to grasp something really complex and difficult, which means that for any given slide, I get 30 to 60 seconds, right? Wow. To get you to grasp a concept. Why couldn't we be doing that with the same material that we're sharing in like these giant market research reports? Couldn't we just summarize that down to one page or do it in a 30-second video? Or for me to say, hey, look, we have all these meetings and events. They last all day. Ironically, I kept being brought in to do like these 8-hour master classes and the like, and which I'm happy to do. And there's something to be said for all these deep dives. But would it not be beneficial more for the audience in some cases to just do like a 30, 45-minute like crash course? Yeah. And I think given our attention spans, the amount of directions we're pulled in, it's important to have methods like this. And basically with Pop Future, we're just saying, could you use fun videos? Could you use humor, right? Do some offbeat graphic that kind of teaches the 10 trends that are going to impact the world in the next 2 years. It's really asking people to take these complex and often boring and dry, dull ideas and make them a lot more fun, fast, and clear to understand.
Exactly. And that's how people learn better. And people, especially entrepreneurs, they tend to be people of action. They don't tend to be theorists. They want to just get in there and do things. And so for your ability to actually have the skill set to train people, which you obviously do, I'm in. So
why work harder when you can work smarter and live better? Life hacks.
With that, tell us a bit more about what you see as a futurist and where, your training and everything is going so people can jump on board and be part of the new trends.
Yeah, no worries. So like I was alluding to earlier, we hear about all these wonderful new technologies, all this AI, all this analytics. We're drowning in data at the moment. But what I think you're going to see in the future is technology is actually going to take more of a background role and push away from the forefront so that experiences feel more natural and human. And by that, what I mean is like you can have the most advanced AI and sensors in the world applicable, but airport security, what I'm really talking about is being able to just walk through the airport, drop your bags at an automated kiosk, stroll through security just by winking at a screen and checking in by sitting on the plane. That's where technology is really going to play a role in the future. So we hear all this stuff, metaverse, NFT, whatever. I actually think we're talking about a future where technology kind of just becomes second nature. and you have drones that are delivering your mail. Or when you check into a hotel, you do it by talking to an artificially intelligent chatbot, which is a computer program smart enough to pass for human. And by the way, you're unlocking the door to your house using your credit card just by waving it as a key. And that credit card can be used to facilitate digital peer-to-peer payments between us. Or if I really want to get cash, not that I think many people will be using it going forward, well, you just go to the ATM, stare at it, or talk to it, and that's how it unlocks. It doesn't need a PIN number. So I think you're going to see more practical uses of that. The other thing is you got to keep in mind we have about 45 billion different devices that are now connected and talking to one another. So this idea of the Internet of Things fully exists. It's there. But we're going to see more and more self-aware office buildings, factories, manufacturing centers that use a combination of sensors and what we call computer vision, the ability for digital devices to see as if through the human eye and recognize objects and people. That's all going to combine to create these like self-sustaining and self-managing facilities. So again, this is all very complex and heady type of stuff, but if you want to see it broken down in simple terms, if you go to our website, it's futurists, plural, speakers.com/popfuture. Again, futuristspeakers.com/popfuture. What we did is basically create a system that anyone can use, including where you can get a free copy of my book, Think Like a Futurist, to get a sense of what's coming next, and then how to put some of these trends in context so that you can better understand and stay attuned to them.
And of course, on LifeHakx, that's with a K and an X, we will have Scott's information. We will have his company's information, his wonderful books, which I have read, Think Like a Futurist. And, you know, even I, who hate numbers and mathematics and everything, it wasn't anything like that. It was actually really informative. It reminded me about attention span and everything else was in it, and human nature and psychology. So I guess what you're saying is that if you happen to be working in a hotel as a receptionist, maybe now's the time to invest in automation and drones.
Maybe. I'm definitely saying invest in the learning. So the other thing, by the way, that I will point out is as we remind people in the keynote speeches and training programs, we are all futurists at heart. So if you think about it, on the one hand, when we get married, not uncommon to assume that it's going to last a lifetime. And when we make an investment, not unusual to assume that it's going to pay off in the long run. But we all know things don't always work out quite as planned. And that frequently forces us to have to adjust our strategies and tactics as a result. Well, guess what? A futurist really is just somebody who makes a point to consider all those types of assumptions, challenge them a bit sooner, and think about all the different strategic alternatives and ways that the future could evolve. And by the way, any of us can do that. It's just a question of, do we say there's one assumption, or do we make 15 different assumptions and plan around them?
I think go on.
I was going to say, we basically, all we do as futurists is challenge people to think a little bit more deeper about some of those what if questions. And in addition to asking those what if questions, we create these little puzzle solving, role playing scenario exercises where we ask you to plan in advance around these possible events that might impact your life or business. And guess what? You don't need a formalized degree or training or have to be a rocket scientist to do that. You could be doing that day in, day out if you wanted.
Well, I think the best way to do that is to get help from an expert and their website, you know, and so I definitely recommend Scott. He is not only a wonderful person to communicate with, he breaks them down, he makes them much more simple. So I'm there at lifehakx.com. We will put up all the blog and information, and I look forward to having some more of your futurist hacks and strategy hacks on LifeHakx. Thank you so much, Scott. It's been a pleasure.
To make your life better. LifeHakx. Technology, business, multimedia, wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. LifeHakx. LifeHakx.com. That's with a K and an X on Radio X.